And crash of the Obamacare website has now been fixed. Things are back up and running. But up and running is, of course, a relative term. 4 weeks into the Obamacare rollout, where does the controversial program stand right now? Where is it heading? Let's have a serious discussion right now between the New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof and Bill Kristol, the editor of the Weekly Standard. Guys, thanks very much for coming in. Nick Kristof, do you have a good understanding how the administration could screw this up, the signature achievement of President Obama during these past 4 weeks?
You know, it's astonishing. I mean, I think the Republicans completely blew it when they were diverting everybody from this mistake by focusing on the government shutdown. And then the Obama administration completely blew it by having absolutely an awful rollout and then waiting so long to acknowledge its severity and waiting for this surge. So, you know, the only thing I can say is that I think that attention was broken among so many different folks in the Obama administration that there was no single adult really in charge.
You have a good understanding, Bill Kristol, of what happened here? Because I would have thought the last thing this administration would have serious troubles with was the rollout of a website.
Well, I think the Obama campaign was good at their web operations. A campaign is a private sector operation with a ton of flexibility. It doesn't have government procurement rules and other such things. I think for a conservative, this is an example of why perhaps you don't want big government running huge chunks of the U.S. economy, and you prefer to have reforms where they're necessary that are private sector and free market friendly.
One of the major criticisms, Nick, is that the president promised in 3 years ago when he was rolling out, when he was pushing for Obamacare 4 years ago, if you have an insurance policy, you can keep your insurance policy. If you have doctors and like them, you can keep your doctors. You don't have to worry about that. But clearly, that has not necessarily turned out to be the case.
Yeah, I think that is a fair criticism. I think there are a lot of people who've been very worried by the letters that they are getting, saying that their policy has been ended. Now, you know, in fact, in many cases, that's because better policy is going to be offered, and I think that as we get closer, some of those people are going to be happy with what they end up with. But there's no question that it's a real shock to a lot of people, and is something I think that the administration did not do a good job of managing expectations on.
The good news, Bill, and you can weigh in on this, is that millions of people who couldn't have afforded health insurance or had pre-existing conditions, or they're old and they're feeble or they're sick or whatever, now for the first time in their lives will be able to get health insurance either subsidized by the federal government or through Medicaid or some other procedure. You welcome that, right?
Well, look, Medicare did provide health insurance for the elderly, Medicaid for the poor. There's a reasonable debate about whether we should expand either of those or find other ways to ensure, and Republicans have plenty of proposals on this, to ensure those with pre-existing conditions. But I think this is the big story is not the website. They can fix the website, presumably. They can't fix this part of Obamacare, which is the destruction of the private insurance market for 19 million people who were purchasing individual health insurance plans. They're now going to be forced, 16 million of them, it looks like, they're going to be forced into the exchanges, where they're going to have to, most of them are going to have to pay more, and most of them are going to pay more for a plan that in many cases will be inferior or will provide a bunch of benefits they don't want. They liked having they're young, healthy, they liked having a catastrophic plan. These were responsible people. These are not the young invincibles who don't want to have health insurance, and that's why I think the bill that's being introduced in an hour by Fred Upton, chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, not a backbencher. This is a leadership-sanctioned bill. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. I think they're going to bring that to a vote in the House. I think that is going to get some Democratic support. I think it can get some support from some Democratic senators. I mean, President Obama said over and over again, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Why can't you keep it if you like it? If you want to subsidize people, sick people, fine. That's a traditional public policy debate. But taking away, preventing people from having the health insurance they want, that seems odd.
Nick, go ahead.
Let me push back at that a little bit. You know, there's no question that this is complicated and there are going to be mistakes that go beyond the website itself. But the same was true of Medicare when it was launched. The same was true of Medicare Part D, the drug benefit. And at the end of the day, what we have and what we have had is a disaster. I mean, according to the World Health Organization, our health system ranks 38th globally, even though we spend more than any other country. And so there's no question that there are going to be problems and difficulties as we move ahead. But we're moving up from an a system that does an extraordinarily poor job of providing efficient health care to Americans.
Let me move on to another subject I want both of you to weigh on. The U.S. spying on friendly countries, on allies. Dianne Feinstein just confirming that the U.S. has been eavesdropping on Angela Merkel's phone call since 2002. That, she says, is a big problem. Nick Kristof, first to you. Do you support this program, this NSA program that's been going on now apparently for years, of spying on friendly allies?
I think the basic problem has been that there's been no adult supervision. I think that too often people have been spying because they could, because they had the technical means, and there wasn't somebody saying, look, what will we actually gain from this, and what are the risks if it's disclosed? And the truth is that at some point there are real risks of disclosure. So it's kind of the classic foreign policy dilemma that you have very modest tactical benefits and a huge strategic risk, and that is now blown up in our faces.
Bill?
I mean, I would say if you're going to eavesdrop on the phone calls of the German chancellor, that has to be something that the President of the United States authorizes and thinks, frankly, is worth the risk of exposure, as Nick says. You can't just have the bureaucracy doing that, and I'd like to know president, this president or the previous president for that matter, sanctioned that, and if so, maybe they thought it was worth it. I don't have a principled problem with, spying, with listening to other people's calls, even some allies, if we think it's important, but you shouldn't do it in a haphazard way, which genuinely damages relations with a real ally.
Which raises the question, Nick, do you think it's true that the President of the United States would not know that the NSA is listening in to Angela Merkel's phone conversations?
I'm a little mystified by that. I talked today to a former senior CIA official and asked about that, and this person said that in the past, when there was an effort to listen to a head of state or head of government, a major person, then that was approved by the National Security Advisor or by the President, that it wasn't something that was just done blithely by the intelligence folks. In this case, what we're reading is that, indeed, the President did not know and was taken by surprise. And I do think it's, that the government, the bureaucracy, has an amazing capacity to operate, with one hand not knowing what the other is doing. So I really don't know what is going on right here. Well,
Bill Kristol, this started back in 2002, if you believe Dianne Feinstein, who's been briefed, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Do you think the former President George W. Bush didn't know?
I don't know, but I think he might have. I mean, I was, as you know, I was Vice President Quayle's Chief of Staff 20 years ago, had access, so would listen in, sit in with him on, very obviously classified briefings, presidential briefing, the daily presidential briefing, and there were, I don't want to give anything away that I shouldn't, but I'm not, there were obvious moments where there was information that could only have come from an intercept. That we'd be having, let's say, preparing for a meeting with a foreign leader, maybe, and they would say, we have reason to believe that the foreign leader has on his mind, intends to raise at this meeting the following points or the following objections to U.S. policy. That could be an intercept of the leader himself, it could be an intercept of one of his advisors, but some penetration of a foreign government's internal communications. I don't know, maybe they never revealed that fact in their briefings of President Obama, but it would be hard to, if they had that information and didn't, it's a little hard to understand.
It's hard to believe that they wouldn't tell the President of the United States, especially as he goes into a meeting, and he's had many meetings with Angela Merkel, that they're listening into her phone conversations, but apparently, if you believe Dianne Feinstein, the President didn't know. All right, Nick Kristof, thanks very much. Bill Kristol, thanks to you as well. Just ahead, serious new legal trouble for the pop star Chris Brown, this time right here in the nation's capital. We're going to have a live report from the courthouse.